Merhaba. Günün son oturumunu başlatmak üzere sözü
Hello,
Kadriye.
everyone. To start the last session of the day, I'd like to invite Kadriye, Aysel, Fidan to take the floor. But before that, I'd like to present to you the panelists and the chair of the panel on experiences at the intersection of freedom of belief and gender. She's a researcher and an activist. She studied preschool teaching and psychological counseling, Department of Boğaziçi University, currently working as a school counselor. And she's one of the founders of the university research center on women's studies, women in interpretations of women, and she worked as a researcher on the topic. She is a member of the Cultural Research for Peace, and she worked on LGBTQI and greening, springing a peace study on that. Thank you very much. Thank you. First and foremost, I'd like to talk to you about my feelings. I'm quite excited and curious coming here to the session today. I'm going to be with you during the last session of today, which is entitled Experiences at the Intersection of Freedom of Belief and Gender. As my colleague shared with you, we will be accompanied by 4 panelists today. Our panelists will be introduced to you, obviously. I'd like to talk a bit about the flow of the session. This is the last session. I'm guessing you're already quite tired. And for those of you who've just joined us, I'd like to share with you a number of reminders. We planned this session to last 90 minutes. Each panelist will be given 15 minutes. If they allow me, I'd like to remind them of the remaining time they have during their speeches. If you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to type them up in the chat box, and after all of the panelists have been heard, I will be communicating to them the questions from the audience. I'd like to introduce now the speakers. The first speaker is going to talk about the strengthening the position of women in mosques, the Women in Mosques campaign. Sena Arslan will be delivering the speech. She is the last year student at Sociology Department at Boğaziçi University, and for over 4 years she's been working as a professional and a volunteer at civil society organizations. She works with refugees in feminism, in social movement. While working as an activist, she also contributes to academic studies, Women at Mosques campaign, Retired Justice, and the Almasta Circassian Women initiatives are some of the initiatives she works as a volunteer. Kayra Akpınar is our next panelist, who is going to be discussing the status of women in Protestant churches. She graduated from Istanbul University, Spanish Language and Literature Department. She lived in Barcelona for a short period of time. Then she moved back to Istanbul, worked as a translator, interpreter, and she worked on child development. And in recent years, in Pera, the Resurrection Church, she works as a teacher. And in the theoretical center, she's doing a master's degree at the moment. Ceren is our next panelist, who is going to talk about Alevism, an ancient faith representing equality of women and men, and that remains despite pressures. That's the title of her speech. She graduated from Bilgi University Communication Department in 2015, and she started doing a master's degree in the same university, focusing on minorities and women. And she is currently working as an independent researcher, focusing on women in Alevism, LGBTQ plus in Alevism, and Alevism in Dersim are some of the areas. Fatma Yavuz is our last panelist, who's going to be delivering a speech on can a woman be the president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs. She did her undergraduate studies at Marmara University and at 29 Mayıs University. She worked, she did her master's, and she was then sent off because of disobedience to the senior management, and the legal proceedings are still ongoing regarding her challenge to the administrative decision against her. If that's all right, by going the order of the session, I'd like to start with Sena Arslan. Of course. Thank you. If I go too fast, please do warn me because I have limited time and I have a lot to say. Greetings to everyone. I'd like to extend my gratitude to the initiative on freedom of belief, because it's quite hard to discuss these topics in this country. So that is extremely valuable for me and my colleagues to be invited here to speak. I'd like to talk to you about Women in Mosques campaign, what we have done and what we're demanding with this campaign. I'd like to talk to you a bit about my observations. To sum up, we're trying to ensure gender equality in mosques, but we're far behind ensuring equality in this field. So we're trying to take baby steps to do something in this field. I'll give you a brief of how we started. A group of women living in Istanbul, using public spaces, using mosques, came together during friendly chats. They shared some of the problems and they experienced in mosques, and they found out that this problem was experienced and shared by many people, and it was not specific to them. That's how it all started, and I wasn't part of this group at the time. And they opened a social media account to see if there were any other women having similar experiences in mosques. To understand the potential other experiences, they made a call opening this social media account. And there were two pillars to this. They wanted to call women to join hands in mosques to discuss their shared problems in mosques. And second pillar had to do with going to Juma prayer together. So here's how it goes. For those of you who are not familiar, there is a section in every mosque dedicated to women, whether in good shape or not. I'm going to talk about that as well, but during Friday prayers, this dedicated area for women is also given to men. So all of the areas of the mosques are given to men during Friday prayers. In other words, women are prevented from joining in prayer on Fridays or doing their normal prayers at that time. And the pretext is that because women are not frequenting mosques very often, the sections dedicated to women are given to men as well during Friday prayer. According to the hearsay regarding the Prophet, men are at the front lines, and that's followed by women and then children. But today we cannot really talk about shared prayer practices. Men and women are not practicing those prayers together, and women are really present to small spaces and segregated places. And when we came together with the women, we said that we experienced this problem, but this is shared by many other women. We should publicize this, and women should write to GMAR, the complaint mechanism of their presidential office, write complaints to other public authorities to communicate their issues. But we wanted to make this more visible. And to achieve that, we organized these meetups, and we called women to join us, be present in mosques, to sit in mosques and share their experiences and decide what to do all together. So we regularly met in mosques and started discussing these problems. And here is the meaning behind it all. It was meaningful to meet up in mosques because it was obviously an option to meet up in any cafe, really. We want to experience being in mosques as well, because women typically use mosques in the following form. They go in the mosque, they do their prayers, and they leave immediately after. And they have to do so because, sociologically speaking, mosques are not very welcoming to women, and the segregated space given to women in mosques is not inviting, really. These are closed, small spaces, and all you want to do is to go in the mosques and do the prayer and leave immediately after. So we wanted to promote being present in mosques more, and that's why we met up in mosques and started sharing the problems we experience in mosques. We've learned a lot from this experience because we ended up realizing that mosques, unfortunately, is a space for men. You are in the area segregated for women, and we discuss there, and we try to not coincide it with the prayer times because we don't want to be affected by the sound that is generated by the practicing of the prayers, and we did choose time slots that were not coinciding with the prayer times, and there's constant circulation in mosques even if it's not prayer time. There are men actually doing prayers in the ground floor, and we've heard a lot of men clearing their throat, coughing and doing things like that, and someone laughed and said that, okay, here's a warning from the men below. And are they doing this on purpose, I asked, and after a while we realized that we heard men clearing throats, coughing, doing such things, such noises, in a way of warning women. Not even the presence of women, but a far away women's sound voice is disturbing to men, and they want to avoid that. I came to Istanbul all the way from an Anatolian city, and I thought that we could go into any mosque, walk into any mosque in Istanbul and look into those mosques in Istanbul because it was Istanbul, and that's something that's been accepted. Women's presence is only accepted in mosques for as long as they are present in mosques just to do their prayers and then leave. Women asking for a place of ablution, clean place of ablution, so on and so forth, are considered to be radical. Women should go in the mosque, do their prayers, and leave immediately. They should not sit and have a rest in the mosques or read in the mosque, and there are no dedicated spaces to do those things in mosques in any case. And women's sections are enclosed with shutters or with some sort of curtains that make them invisible from the viewpoint of people on the outside. And these kinds of closures or curtains are not part and parcel of the original architecture or structure of these mosques because they typically date back to Ottoman times. And in some cases, women cannot even step into the general area of the mosque. Parternial is a very marvelous mosque in Aksaray, which is named after a woman, which was commissioned by women, but women are not taken in that mosque because the women's section is entirely outside of the mosque. It's not It's just a chamber of the complex that comprises the historical structure. I've never seen in my life the inside of the Parternial Mosque. I've been to the mosque, but I only did my prayer in that square box-shaped room and left immediately. And this is not part and parcel of the practice. In most cases, you just go into a space dedicated, segregated for women, you do your prayer and you leave immediately, not actually being in the mosque itself. And there's very interesting sociological phenomenon about it, and I'm going to talk about it later on, checking my time at the same time. So throughout this campaign period, we tried to make women's voices heard. We wanted them to tell us about their experiences, whether good or bad. And we wanted to share those experiences on social media so that more people heard about this, so that authorities were pushed to take action. And we asked them to take photos of the actual physical conditions of those women's sections in the mosques. We were trying to come up with a bigger picture of the actual situation. While doing this work on the virtual platform, we tried to contact authorities at the same time. We talked to the Mufti authority in Istanbul. We've spoke to the Vice Mufti. That was an interesting interview because when we talked to them about our problems, we've realized that they were fully aware of these problems experienced by women, what challenges women experienced, that they were prevented from actually going to the mosque. They were fully aware of what was going on, and they told us that we do not manage or administer those mosques. Whoever is the most frequent user of that mosque supervises the ongoings in the mosque. So there's a civil society organization called Mosque Administrations, which provides services, funds to the mosques, services in the form of cleaning or repair work. They make those arrangements, and the majority, if not all of these societies or organizations are made up of men, which means that they're not looking out for women and the circumstances they have in those mosques. And women are not allowed to go and do any changes or amendments to the mosques when they want to do so and go and apply to a public authority. Well, technically they could, but there is a power struggle or conflict between the mufti or the public authority, if you like, and this organization looking after the mosque. And in other words, public authority do not want to face off this community. They tried to remove those curtains on some occasions, for example, but they couldn't succeed in the end because the organization members put those curtains back up. There are good examples, good practices as well. For example, Arab Mosque is located in Karaköy, which was converted from a church. An imam of that mosque is quite an inclusive person, because it is not frequented very much. It's the marketplace, Karaköy, that kind of zone, if you like. There are lots of craftsmen, and sometimes those imams can be sent away by the community members. They have this power. I advise you to go and visit that mosque. There is a children's park with toys where children can play and spend time in mosques. That's a very individual example as well, because children are not allowed to go into mosques and act as they want very often. And there's no way we could actually talk about equality in a mosque. We're not looking to divide a mosque into two sections and allow women to benefit from the atmosphere of the mosque. Women are still asking some basic questions. Is there clean toilets, clean places of ablution in the mosques? We are at that point, unfortunately. And the state or the Religious Affairs Administration is not encouraging women to mosques to be more inclusive of women, and the community is against that as well, and that gives you a vicious cycle at the end of the day. Conditions welcoming women in the mosques are not created. Women are finding themselves unable to go to the Friday prayers into the mosques, and the community goes around and says that women are not frequenting mosques very much anyway. To remind you the time remaining, I have 2 minutes, right? Yes. And when you go to a mosque and ask for your right to be given, you're treated as if you're going against God. And my request from the women present here is to go into a mosque, go towards the middle of the mosque's space, main hall, and you'll see how many people will try to stop you on your way, on your tracks, and ask you where you're going. They're treating us as if we are disrupting the order and peace in the mosque, when we have no peace in mosques in any case at any given time, because we're not given proper conditions, proper spaces to do our prayers in mosques. I ran out of time, so I'm not going to go on any longer. I'd like to share one piece of data with you. As for the solutions, I think the state has to take certain steps. I've looked into more than 600 Friday prayer speeches. Only 4 of them had to do with women since 2009, I think. And these themes, including women, family, and marriage, represented 3% of all of the speeches delivered by imams during Friday prayers. And we're not in a position, I think, at the moment, realistically, ask the authorities to have mosques equally available to women. That's why we have to start by taking smaller steps. I think I ran out of time at the moment. Thank you very much for your attention. If we receive any further questions during the Q&A, I think we'll have the opportunity to deepen the presentation. Before I move on to the next speaker, I'd like to share with you a small experience during Friday prayers actually during Friday prayers where there's an excess of male population that flow into the streets. And when you step before them, they look down on you, not wanting you to interrupt with their rituals, and there's unacceptable community practices such as these as well. I want to add this piece of experience because Juma prayers, Friday prayers, and the speeches delivered during Friday prayers are subject of debate, really. They can lead to issues. So I'll move on to the next speaker. Kayra Akpınar is going to talk about status of women in Protestant churches. The floor is yours.
Ben de öncelikle teşekkür etmek istiyorum organizasyon için ve
Hello, thank you very much for this organization and for your participation. This has been quite a valuable learning process for all of us. I would like to give you some information on the Protestant societal structure in our country, and then I would like to discuss the status of women in Protestant churches, and then I would like to talk about the effect of general limitations on women. The Protestant church is a small community in Turkey, and the recent one. We can talk about Armenian churches for the past 100 and 150 years, but the existence of Protestants goes back to only 50 years ago. And the number is quite limited. It's not 10,000, for example, it's around 8,000. And we're not talking about the existence of a church in every city. Only big cities have churches. When I say church, I'm not talking about a building. I'm talking about the existence of a community, by the way. There is not a clergy in Protestant churches. The terms such as pastor are used for priests. Some say elderly. For example, these terms exist in the Bible. Some say supervisor, for example. I prefer that. We have a building, an Armenian Protestant church building. We have a team of 3 people as community leaders, if you will. So what does that mean? We are responsible for prayers and the flow of church businesses. So the flow of business is up to us. We evaluate the needs, the subjects that we need to approach. We deliver consultancy services as well. We lead prayers along with other individuals. Sacraments, the ritual of bread and wine, we conduct that. Also, we give information to people who visit our church, who seek information. There are many different dimensions, categories. Of course, we do not do it all by ourselves. We have assistants. We have a team. Also, other members of the community of the church help us. All of this is on a voluntary basis. Volunteers are both men and women. And in Protestant churches, the entire community prays together. Men, women, and children, they pray together on Sundays. And depending on the location, depending on the equipment, piano can accompany the prayers, for example. There is a teaching process for adults and also for children. There is an activity carried out separately for both groups. As I said, there is the ceremony of bread and wine that takes place. And at the end of the prayers, usually there is a conversation time, a chat time, accompanied with tea and other snacks. Again, men, women, and children are all welcome to join this activity. This social dimension is very important to our churches. Within our society, as people get excluded from the society, from their groups, this social environment in the church and human relations are especially important for us. The understanding of the church is not regional. You do not say, this church is close to me, so I should go to that one. This is not the case, because also there is not a church in every province, or there is not a church in every district, so this is not possible. What matters is for people to communicate and to establish relationships with others. So they feel themselves closer to certain churches and they participate, they join such churches. The state does not procure buildings for Protestant churches. Therefore, as Protestant churches, we have to communicate with other traditional churches in order to use their buildings. About that, there are some positive examples and some negative ones as well. There are those who do not welcome us that much. Or Protestant churches need to be creative, very creative about finding buildings, and they can be creative. I'm going to talk about that soon, and the dimension of women as well. Let me talk about the role of women in Protestant churches. As I said, men and women pray together. They do not have separate lines. They do not have separate seatings. There is no separation at all. They pray together. And in the Bible, the prophet Messiah has a revolutionary attitude towards women. It's based on respect. It's based on this great respect in theology. And the doctrines do not include women and their role in the kitchen as carers for the children only. And we can see the effect of this attitude in many ways, because women can pray freely in Protestant churches. Many women can participate in different tasks during prayers, during music activities, during different spheres of church life. And if necessary, women within their community, not within their church buildings, but within their community, they organized, for example, reading groups or prayer groups. And this especially includes women whose husbands are not Christian, are not Protestants. This is very important for such women. Sometimes they are suppressed, and this is an environment that they need, where they can share their problems, their troubles, where they can seek support. And as I said, women play an important role in terms of raising children in the church. We're not only talking about mothers here, single mothers from different age groups provide such services for children other than their own children. We also try to encourage our men to do that as well, because childcare does not only belong to women. It's not merely a women's responsibility. We also have affection services, as we call them. This is services for helping people from within the church and outside the church as well. Women also play an active role here. Frankly, in Protestant churches, if women say, well, this is all from us, we're not going to do anything else, then there wouldn't be much activity in Protestant churches. I do not have solid figures, but I can easily say that women make up the majority in the Protestant churches. And as I said, I believe that the Prophet Messiah's perspective towards women was quite effective there. It's not patriarchal. Women play an important role, and this has a big impact on creativity, on other important activities that go on in the church. The leading and teaching dimensions might differ. Here, we cannot talk about full equality. There are different opinions there, actually. Some passages from the Bible suggest that women should not lead men. Actually, it's interpreted in that way. And this is why women do not take on teaching positions. And this is not unique to Turkey. This is similar everywhere. But in our country, we take some small steps. For example, in seminars and conferences out of the church, women take teaching roles in front of mixed groups made up of both men and women. But there are other members of our community that believe that women should not take up such roles, take on such roles. But as I said, because of the attitude of the Prophet Messiah, I believe there will be many changes in the future. The role of women and women playing a teaching role, I believe, are very important for the health of the church. Women are quite competent in that sense, and sometimes we do not have a significant number of men who are competent in taking on teaching positions. But unfortunately, in some environments, an incompetent man can be preferred over a competent woman, which is quite worrisome. So in my own church, in my own community, I am encouraging women to take on such roles, and I try to understand that the Bible does not suggest a universal ban of preventing women from assuming such roles. So in my church, men and women serve equally. We try to underline the fact that we enrich each other, men and women. And most importantly, we believe that this is the God's will for humanity, equality between men and women. So let me talk about the impact on women, Protestant lives, in the context of Protestant lives mostly. The living condition for Protestants affect women more. Of course, sometimes Protestants are seen as a religious cult. So if a woman adopts this belief, she can find herself in a difficult position, especially if her husband is not a member of the same community. They are subjected to oppression, fear. They also have an important problem in terms of finding a worshiping place, because sometimes they have to pray in a building that doesn't resemble a church, that looks like an ordinary shop, and people can develop negative attitudes towards such phenomena. So these issues damage women and therefore children. For women to be free in practicing their beliefs and to be free in this manner, the society's perspective towards women should change. And women are judged with regards to their children as well. For example, If I go to the church in the weekend, people ask me, but where are your children? What are they doing? They could not imagine the fact that their father can also take care of them. So limiting women to motherhood, this understanding should be changed. Also, people believe that women should seek the permission of their husbands in order to participate in such religious activities. In terms of education and in terms of participation, if women cannot improve themselves, of course, they cannot tap into their potential. For example, I, for one, know that I fulfill my potential, I tap into my potential thanks to also the support of my husband. If women are supported in this way, they will be more effective in the society. According to the Bible, women are creative, are valuable creatures. They are not merely someone's wife, someone's children. They are individuals before God. We do our best in our church to equip women with necessary qualities. To give them a solid place in the society. We are trying to give this message to women and also to men and to their children. I will wrap up now. Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to remind you. So we also want to make women more free in terms of practicing their religion. This will be, again, not for only our church, but for the entire society. Thank you very much. I hope that all these wishes will become true in the near future. Thank you very much for your speech. Our next panelist is Ceren Ataş. Ceren Ataş will talk to us about Alevism, an ancient faith representing equality of women and men, and that remains despite pressures. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you. I would like to thank other participants as well. My title is an ancient faith, but also a permanent one. Since 2020, in Dersim, I have been working on Alevism, and I am also the member of the first feminist Alevi organization that is called 17 Plus Women. I will explain what that means later. So, why am I an Alevi feminist? I would like to talk to you about why I needed to be active in this field. So first of all, I would like to talk about what Alevism is. Because of the way of writing the history and because of the organizations of the state, Alevism is not directly defined. Alevism is perceived as if it's something that is compiled, a bit from there, a bit from another place. Alevism, it's a belief in itself. It's not a religion. It's not institutional, if you will. It's a belief. But where does this come from? Let me talk to you about that. Some participants mentioned this before. Alevism does not talk about creation, does not talk about Adam and Eve. In Alevism, we're all the same. We come from the same thing, and we go to the same thing. And the first one that existed was Fatma. Therefore, Alevism was a feminist belief. When there was no Allah, when there was no world that existed, Alevism existed according to the belief itself. So what I'm saying is that Alevism is a belief in itself, and I also would like to support what I said about women. For example, in Alevism, there is no death. There is just a change, a turnover, if you will. We go and we turn into a tree when we die. There is no heaven, there is no hell. So all types, all forms, all creatures are equal, and they turn into each other in the end. So when I say that everyone is the same, everyone is equal, I also would like to talk about gender. Alevism does not have a gender politics, a gender policy. It does not say women can do that, women can't do this, women are filthy when they have their periods, or women cannot touch the dead. This is not what Alevism says. This is not part of Alevism's doctrines. By the way, this is in theory. I will talk about the practices later. In Alevism, women and men are equal. I have been working on women in Alevism for years, and I have been encountered with many difficulties, such as many of my colleagues. But no one comes to us and says, no, in Alevism, women and men are not equal. No one can say that. No one will be able to say that in the future, because Alevism is not about that. Alevism is all about equality. Community leader, the term of community leader, I don't know if it's right to use this term here. Actually, they say peer, but I don't know if it's correct to use that. We have different formations, different foyers, if you will. And here the leaders are not men. They can be both women and men. So women and men, they play the same role as they create a family. And Cem prayers, they are also considered as conversations. But there are, as I said, some contradictions between practices and the theory, because who lead the prayers, who lead the Cem prayers are in general dedes, who are men, and there's only one woman in such a position in Turkey, in Cemevis in Turkey. So I had talked about the term 17 plus before. By the way, I will be referring to the Islam stories, but if it's in conflict with the Islam, then my colleagues can correct me. So Hacı Bektaş, when he promenades, he sees a door and he knocks on it. He tries to get in, and he says he's just a man of the God. And he gets into the place, and there are 17 women waiting there. There's an assembly of women, and everyone becomes equal there. So I want to make a reference to this concept of being equal. Alevism does not have any doctrines on clothes. Alevism does not say that women should wear this and men should wear that. And prayers and conversations, they involve both men and women at the same time. Some Cemevis put men and place in different seatings, but this is not actually one of the main doctrines of Alevism. Sema does not include only men. Women and men participate together. So women can do anything that a man can, actually. There is no thing that women can't do and men can do. But we would like to underline this issue because the dominant beliefs apply a lot of assimilation activities. The state apply a lot of activities like that, and Alevism activities, they get assimilated. They try to resemble to other beliefs. I'm not saying it's negative or positive, but they're different. For example, if you go to an Alevi village today, you can see men and women sitting together and praying together. And in Cemevis, this can change from time to time. And this is something that I observed personally. One day I was not allowed to sit with a man, and when I asked why, they said because Sunnis sometimes visit our Cemevi.
And as far as women's studies are concerned, in Alevism, we are not trying to prove equality between men and women in Alevism. This has already been proven. What we're trying to achieve is that today's converted, assimilated, or distinguished Alevism institutions are to be reverted back to their original format. And I'd like to talk about the concept of Can, the living being, and that's will be linked to LGBTQI, and it is linked to the unity that I've mentioned during the Assembly of the 40. In Alevism, you're defined not as men and women, but as a Can, as a living being. And in the literature of Alevism, homosexuals are not marginalized. There's no such doctrine. There are open or closeted homosexuals in Alevism. There are two ancients that are married to one another that are homosexuals. As far as I've heard, not through official marriage ceremony, of course, but LGBTI issue has been opened for discussion in recent years, and we're doing research into it as well. I still have a little bit more time. While doing these studies, we haven't run into any difficulties regarding equality. We try to carry out research in a lot of Alevi institutions, as did many of our women colleagues. And at the end of the 7-year period, we've seen women only working in a kitchen or in a secretariat. Their views were being taken. And Kayra said something, and I agree with her. If women were to neglect Cemevis just one day, everything would crumble down. We currently have co-chairs accompanying men, and we have Alevi institutions that are imposing women quotas in France. Many Cemevis have only women administration, senior managers, and we are trying to launch activities and programs to promote gender equality. Alevism is a belief that has no sex policy and has no gender gap. Assimilation has become an important issue to look out for in recent times, but we'll try to tackle that as well. As far as I'm aware, I've abided by my time. I think you still have 3 minutes. All right, if there are any further questions, I can go on. All right, then, thank you. Thank you. It was an excellent presentation with good timing. Thank you. Our final speaker is Fatma Yavuz. She's going to deliver a presentation as part of the question of can a woman be the president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs? The floor is yours. Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Good viewing to everyone. I'd like to extend my gratitude to the initiative for freedom of belief, I wanted to have a striking title to my presentation because I'd like to introduce this to the literature in this format exactly. So I'm jumping right into the subject. Previously, I worked as a Quran teacher at the Religious Affairs Presidency for 14 years. I'm from this community. I studied at Imam Preacher Schools for 6 years. I did religious studies at university for 4 years, and I worked in the Religious Affairs presidencies. As I said, I'm from the neighborhood, I'm from the community. In my whole childhood and youth were spent in this environment, in this community, and I received services as a woman from the religious affairs, and I take this on as a duty. That wasn't my introduction originally, but let me carry on in this vein. Because as far as I've observed, this issue is not being discussed at all. I haven't heard anyone speak about this that openly on a panel in any conference. There are lots of conferences and panels held about women in Islam. We are eating, drinking, and breathing women in Islam now, but I haven't heard anyone ask this question openly. Can a woman be the president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs? Why not? Well, it didn't occur to me until I was kicked out of the Religious Affairs Presidency, and I've experienced an enlightenment after that. Apparently, I still had chains around myself up until that point, because that's how I started to ask this question. It all started with a joke, actually. Among my friends, I started referring to Ali Erbaş, the current president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs. We were just joking around and laughing amongst one another. Why not a woman be the president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs? And it turned a little more serious, because for a feminist, the answer to the question is very simple and straightforward. Of course they can, why not? And I'm sure many of you think along the same lines. And for many other egalitarian people, the answer is fairly straightforward and simple. Of course, a woman can be the president of Presidency of Religious Affairs. Why not? Well, it's not that simple to me. If you make a woman president, why not? Absolutely, there's no problem regarding the legislation or the administrative rules, but without undermining the sensitivities of the community. How do you do that? How do you go about that? And how do we go about that without hurting anyone's feelings, as is the custom in Alevism? There are millions of people who are benefiting from the services of the president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs. How about finding women to be the president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs without upsetting the people, upsetting people's religious sensitivities? That's the kind of answer I'm looking out for. Otherwise, the answer to the question is quite simple. I tried to think long and hard about this question. Unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately maybe, but I am from a Sunni background, Sunni belief backgrounds. This is a tradition of 1400 years with a lot of baggage, historically speaking. Unfortunately, I'm unable to say that we're egalitarian, we're for equality of men and women. Like Ceren and them said, we have a lot of problems. We have to think long and hard about gender equality. We have to build new constructs about gender equality. As the younger population, as far as I've observed, a lot of energy is being poured into this issue, this question. And I started to think about the following. According to Sunni belief, how do people arrange themselves within mosques? According to the traditional Sunni understanding, women cannot be imams, let alone president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs. How much time do I have left, by the way? You have about 9 minutes, I think. All right. So I'll have to stop at 5. Okay. So if a woman can't even be imam, how can women be president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs? Fatma, I asked myself. Then I realized there was an advantage. I'm not talking about a woman becoming a caliph. These are two different things, because the president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs is not a caliph. He's not a leader of the believers. And Muslims are quite proudly proclaiming that we have no religious class. That's a very fundamental fact about Islam, and this has always been emphasized, and this is an advantage which we could use, I thought, because president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs is simply a bureaucrat. That's what I've clarified in my mind, at least. And Presidency of Religious Affairs is a state institution which was established with the Republic, and the president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs have no religious authority. They're not a caliph. If they are a civil servant, equality is of essence, and women as well as men can become civil servants in that capacity. And people, by the way, were reacting that, I feel like you are aiming for that position. Yes, I am. I'm not going to lie. I consider myself a candidate for the Presidency of Religious Affairs, and I have a lot of programs and actions in my mind. If I ever happen to be in that position, I'd like to do a lot of things, introduce a lot of changes. Why not? And how about conducting Friday prayers, delivering Friday sermon? What are you going to do about that? I found a very simple solution for that. There are lots of positions for vice presidents of Presidency of Religious Affairs. The President of Religious Affairs only appears on those occasions, occasionally, really. I'm not about to hold a sword in my hand and deliver a sermon in Hagia Sophia Mosque, and I have no intention of doing so. And as far as I've observed, if there is a higher level public authorities present in the mosque, then the President of Religious Affairs goes into that mosque as an imam and conducts the Friday prayer. I can send off one of my deputies. Why not? That's my solution. And on the other hand, I don't want to be lynched here, but I don't see any problem with the women conducting Friday prayer. The world would not turn upside down because of that, but I wouldn't do that still, because I think that we have to bear in mind the beliefs, faith of the believers, the faithful that is in the mosque. And we're interpreting in a Protestant manner that is outside of the ancient belief, which deserves respect, I believe, but we cannot impose that Protestant way of thinking. I'm against imposing it. We have this modern, new, enlightened thought system that you have to abide by, that you're ignorant if you do not do so. And I'm not in favor of that. And I think it has to do with my background, because these pilgrim old men in the mosques have honest feelings by going into that mosque, and they sincerely believe that that's never going to happen, and we should not really take out a stick and tell them that you're wrong, you're ignorant, you don't know what it's supposed to be. I don't think we should hurt their feelings. We shouldn't hurt pilgrim old men. We shouldn't assume the place of redesigning Sunni belief. But I believe that as an administrative post, women can easily become president of Presidency of Religious Affairs, and other positions can be fulfilled by deputies very easily. Can this be done? Yes. And I think that religious affairs should be presided over by a woman, and I'd prefer a woman. But I don't know if this would be pejorative in feminism, but a woman's hand is required and very much needed in religious affairs. And everything is so masculine, not just the presidency, but everything is so masculine in religious affairs. Everything is oriented in that way. All of the programs, all of the actions. And I think women's mentality, mindset is going to bring about a lot of novelties, open up new horizons. I'm half jokingly saying that I am a candidate to become the president of religious affairs, but really, truly, what I want to see in the future is one of my younger colleagues to become presidents. I'm not trying to create a turmoil. I'm trying to start up some sort of inception in the minds of my younger colleagues. I wasn't even imagining becoming a mufti or becoming anything at all. More recently, I've seen the women given the right to become a deputy mufti and some higher level positions, administrative positions, and I was quite ignorant then, being very happy about these minor allowances. And I'm now telling myself that, why are you thankful for that when you could become a president of religious affairs? And one of the reasons I was kicked out is the following. In the ancient literature, there's a hearsay, which is considered to be true fact, and I don't think it can be true fact. And it says that women are deficient in their mind, in their intelligence, because they menstruate. I heavily criticized that. I did not accept that at all. And this is one of the reasons I was kicked out of the institution. And the pretext was that true doctrine of Islam was being put to discussion. According to them, that's what I did, and that's what I was kicked out of my position. So men believe that we are deficient in our mindset, so we can only be helpers, not more. Everything fits in perfectly, you see. That's why my enlightenment came after that. While I was believing that this was a true doctrine of Islam, I couldn't even imagine something like that to be untrue, let alone discussing it right now. I am quite protest. I'm quite the type that goes against the tide. And for long years, despite that, for long years, I had accepted as a fact that I was deficient in my mind, that the Prophet had actually said this, that we had to abide by this doctrine, that was needed to have the consent of the gods. And I lived a very long time believing that I minded. And now I'm quite surprised how come they ended up managed creating such a taboo that was even able to convince someone like me. And I'm saying this also to help you analyze people like me. You open your eyes into this world in such a community, believing such things that you don't hear anything else. You're not exposed to anything else in your family, in your school. My family is quite conservative. My family sent me off to Imam prayer schools who were even more conservative than my parents and my family. And when I've adopted this idealist spirit and I went off to study religion at university, I went into an even more conservative environment. And then I started working for a religious affairs presidency, which was even more conservative than the past one, the previous one. And I ran into trouble at the time, and which was a very good thing for me, which was a silver lining for me. When some of those walls were brought down by these events, I started thinking, and I want my younger colleagues to think about these facts harder as well. And for the first time this year, I made a video clip and put it on my social media asking the same question: can a woman be the president of Presidency of Religious Affairs? And I'm sharing this idea for the second time on this platform. That is why this program was very useful to me. So I'd like this question to be raised on other platforms as well. And nationally, politically, this should be part of the program of the political parties. All of the policy makers should ask this question. if, for example, some of the political parties, all of the political parties should say that if we win the election, we will assign a women president of the Presidency of Religious Affairs. Of course, there should be merit in it, but some of the political party programs should include that. Millions of Muslim women should hear about what you think on this subject. I think this should be open to discussion politically as well, and very soon so. I'd like to conclude my remarks by giving the following message, especially those colleagues who are working in secular field. Please do not dismiss this subject. What is she talking about? What is this? Why is this important? You're already far away from feminist topics. You wouldn't even help us out. But believe me when I say that if we do not fix the Presidency of Religious Affairs, we cannot achieve full equality. You should not be dismissing this question. You should be interested in this question because this also generates inequality. Here's the recipe for equality, and we cannot step back after that. I wish it was possible to solve this issue by generating a fully fledged theory on it. Secular institutions are generating inequality as well, not just non-secular ones. We have to surgically intervene. We have to give out detailed, concrete recommendations and suggestions, not just give overall positive messages that we should all be equal. We have to issue concrete suggestions, concrete recommendations as to what actions should be taken so that our efforts are not in vain, that we can get positive and concrete results. I think I've exceeded the time allocated to me. Over to you. Thank you.
Yürüten inanç özgürlüğü girişimi adına ben teşekkür ederim. Bütün hepinizin
I would like to thank you on behalf of the Initiative of Freedom of Faith and our participants, because each of your presentations was quite informative and raised and triggered more questions. So let's continue with the questions. We have received some questions for specific panelists. If we receive more questions, I will be directing them to you. First of all, the first question is about the campaign of women in mosques for Sena. In Turkey and in abroad, are there any differences in terms of the use of women of mosques? And there's an observation here. The women in the UK make more efficient use of mosques in the UK. So what do you think are lackings there, and what can we do in order to remove these inequalities? Yes, in the US and in Europe, there are radical uses of mosques. For example, there are mosques that include LGBTI. Women and men can pray together in some mosques in Europe and the US. This is the situation in the US and in Europe, but it is different in the Middle East. For example, as you know, the Blue Mosque receives a lot of tourists on Fridays, and I was talking to some women there. For some women, the location of men and women in mosque is not a problem at all, but sometimes in summer there are a lot of people. People are outside the mosque, women are on one side and men are on the other side, and there's a gap in between, but technically they're on the same line. And as a woman had told me, I came here to offer my Friday prayings, but women and men are on the same line, and this is not right for me. So geography changes a lot. But what was the other questions, Kadriye? Can you repeat them, please? Yes. A question was about how to remove such inequalities between men and women in terms of the use of mosques. What can we do? Here I can refer to what Fatma had said before. I am not for preserving or protecting the feelings of the community, because if you do not take any steps, when you say worship places are also women's rights, You should say this in Friday sermons. Other than that, men are not going to take initiative to include women. We should organize women, and we should also organize authorities, move them, force them towards equalistic conditions. We know that equal conditions are not possible in the near future, but we should push towards that. But someone had written here, authority is also male. Our counterparts are all male, and they have a male perspective. And this is another problem that we're faced with. Thank you very much. There is another question for you now that you're speaking. I would like to ask all your questions first. Do you believe that your work is effective and does it have impact on women? Yes, we believe that our work is effective. They produce impact. Some women believe that this effort is in vain. They say that we can enter into mosques. What more do you want? And this is sufficient, they say. I thought it was only me, but there are other women like that. They say, there's a group that says, I'm glad you're there. I'm glad you're working for us. I'm grateful for all the work that you carry out, they say. There are two groups. But we need to go more to the fields. We need to talk to women one by one in the fields, how they reach out to these mosques. Do they belong to a group, to a community? How do they feel when they offer their prayers in mosques? So we have to discover the field more. Fatma had mentioned this before, that it never occurred to her. We just went into a mosque and offered our prayers and got out. We didn't even question why it was so dirty. Now we're asking ourselves these questions, and this campaign helped us ask these questions. This is why I believe our work is effective and helpful. Okay, thank you. Kayra Hanım, we have a question for you. In non-Muslim communities in Turkey, there's a rumor that women are more pious than men, and among those who converted, the ratio of women is higher than men. Is this your observation as well in terms of the Protestant community in Turkey? If this is the case, what would you say about that? I don't have statistics with me, but yes, I can say that the majority is made up by women in our churches. I didn't talk much about the Armenian church, but they are similar in that sense, I can say that. The same goes for those who converted to Christianity. I believe this could be related to the perspective towards women in this religion. Jesus' approach towards women, the area of freedom provided to women, this is all what makes us feel warm in our hearts. Therefore, I believe this must be effective in terms of women being so active and taking the majority in our churches. Thank you very much. I have two questions for Ceren. Should I ask them together? Let's go separately. I would prefer it that way, of course. The first question: what kind of a counter activity should we carry out to prevent the assimilation of Alevis? There's an example here, celebration of Ramadan in Alevi villages. How do you evaluate that? Very general questions. Right. How can Alevis prevent assimilation? What can they do by themselves? I think they shouldn't be institutionalized. What I'm trying to say is Cemevis should be independent. This can not only be achieved with the efforts of Alevis. Actually, the only worship place of Alevis is not Cemevis. We have other places, but Cemevi is kind of a representative, has kind of a representative value. But these are places where we should have our own format. I think fighting against assimilation is about having an independent quality. Another issue, you talked about Ramadan, the internal assimilation within Alevi communities. Some Alevis going to the mosque on the religious holiday. Or if there is only one Alevi village around many Sunni villages, they celebrate Ramadan as well. They practice Ramadan as well. These are all a result of assimilation, and it is a result of the instinct to protect themselves, actually. I believe it is accepted in these communities, but it shouldn't be, because they should not be assimilated. In the question, the person mentions the term of Alevism without Ali. Actually, it's not what you think. It's about Ali not being the nephew of the Prophet Muhammad. The term Ali here in our methodology is an idea that goes against injustices. After 4 caliphates, there was an era of conflicts, and for us, for Alevis, it is a clash of throne, and we do not accept that. So Ali for us is moon. It is the moon, it is the sun, it's one of the gods and goddesses. So it's not the nephew of the Prophet Muhammad for us. So how about the second question? The second question, you said that in Cemevis, the leaders are usually men. There is only one woman that leads the Cemevi in Turkey. So what Cemevis what can Cemevis do differently in order to have leading female figures like that? Actually, yes, in this one Cemevi, there is this person, Ana, the leading female figure that leads prayers. This is something that they did for their image. I'm not saying it's something negative, it's something positive, and it's very important that they do that. When I went to the field, I talked to the leading male characters. I talked to them about the leading female figures, and actually the society is all for it. The community is all for it, because female figures are important in the culture of Alevism. They are respected, they're very well known. The society does not think it's weird, but there are some outside perceptions. There are some lies told about Alevism. Therefore, they are refraining from using female figures that much. But that Cemevi is not that different than others, as I said. Fatma, there's a question for you. The President of Religious Affairs, can this person come from a non-Muslim community? Do you believe such a change is needed? Actually, you had mentioned this in your speech. Yes, of course, I think it can be. A non-Muslim can be the President of Religious Affairs. Non-Sunni person can do that. It's not like that person has to lead the prayers. that person is going to carry out administrative duties, and the assistants can lead the prayers. There is nothing to be afraid. The society is afraid, but there is nothing to be afraid. As I said, that person does not have to go to the mosque and lead the Friday prayers. Just lead the administrative processes. But can this happen in Turkey? I believe we need years and years to get there. Thank you very much. There is no further questions. We have 5 minutes left, and I would like to use that time to ask a question myself. Actually, this question is more for Kayra and Fatma, but if our other panelists would like to contribute, they can, of course. We talked about minority beliefs. We talked about Protestants. We talked about Alevis, and both of our panelists, they talked about these beliefs within Islam. And they called themselves as protest figures. I would like to ask you, if Kayra and Ceren were the majority groups in Turkey, how would they react? What would they think? And vice versa for Fatma and Sena. I just would like to put yourself in the other party's shoes to tackle the issue. What would this attitude include in that case? And Fatma, if you were a member of a minority rather than on the other side of the scale, what would the practices be? What would your practices be? How would they be? So let's imagine that dynamics are reversed. In that case, what would your activities involve? Was this question for me? Yes, for you and Kayra at first, and then our other panelists, Ceren and Sena, can also take the floor. We only have 3 minutes left. Well, for me, it's all details, very clearly. You can call it justice. You can call it equality. I call it equality. I call it justice. I'm just going after justice. I'm just chasing justice, if you will. And I would do the same thing. I would pursue justice. Before, I used to think that what matters is what you say, not who you say, not who says it. But now I don't think in the same way. I believe that there are people who say more equalistic things than me. But what makes me different is that I am speaking from within this community, from within the Presidency of Religious Affairs. This is why my words can have more impact, because I listen to other colleagues, other people. I am conservative as compared to them, but they do not get any reaction. But I speak as someone who served a position within the Presidency of Religious Affairs. And I think in that sense, what I say matters. If I was on the other side of the picture, I would fight against the taboos that prevailed where I was. Thank you. Well, it's difficult to imagine something that's not real, but here is something that comes to mind. This is not unique to Turkey, as I said before. In Protestant churches, Yes, by the way, the society in Turkey and in the Middle East are more patriarchal.
Daha da çarpıcı kılabiliyor yani hani Batı'ya kıyasla aslında.
This is why the message of the Messiah is more striking here. So it is striking in the context of this society.
Böyle bir mücadeleye daha fazla odaklanma ihtimali belki olurdu.
If we were the majority, maybe we would focus more on that. But there is something else that comes to my mind now. Since we are a minority, a very small one,
Kardeşliği korumak bizim için çok değerli ve o zaman
it is very important for us to protect our unity, protect our
birazcık hani Fatma'nın da
sisterhood
değindiği gibi yani hani rencide etmeden
and
hani
brotherhood. As Fatma mentioned, without imposing anything on anyone, we are trying to make people think.
daha çoğunluk olsak, daha büyük olsak falan bazen de bu tür değerler kaybedilebilir böyle tartışmalarda.
If we
Yani
were
hani
bigger, such
bir tarza girilebilir. Hani öyle bir risk olabilir.
values can be lost. It could be a risk.
İçinde yaşadığımız gerçek bu. O zaman onun doğrultusunda.
So this is the reality we have. We are focusing more on the reality with love. We are doing our best.
Ceren Hanım, Sena Hanım, eğer sizin de katkılarınız
If you would like to add anything, Ceren, Sena, we can go on for a couple of minutes more. I can only say one thing. Of course, it's hard to imagine, but I would never want to be a part of something that's in control, that's in power. That doesn't seem like something positive to me. I believe this is about the context. So if I was a part of a minority group, if I was a Christian, for example, or if I was a Muslim in another country, I would rather discuss our relations with the state, how we can worship, etc., rather than equality between men and women, I believe. I would be more interested in the rights of the community, I guess. Thank you very much.
herhangi bir ekstra soru yöneltilmedi. Sürenizi 1 dakika aştık.
There is no extra question. We are only 1 minute beyond our allocated time. So we have come to the end of the third session of the International Conference on Freedom of Religion or Belief and Gender Equality in Turkey. I would like to thank all our panelists for sharing their experiences with us. Sena, Arslan, Kayra, Akpınar, Ceren, Ataş, Fatma, Yavuz, thank you very much. I also would like to thank all of you. This has been quite a busy day. And Aysel Hanım, with your last question, you triggered a lot of complex thoughts on our minds. Thank you very much. This was quite a striking end. It has been a long, long day. We do not want to keep you here anymore. We would like to thank all our moderators, all our panelists and participants.